this is going to be a different baseball season than we've ever seen before, which makes sense because this is a different year than we've ever seen before. Ahmed Fareed here with my two good friends from Rotoworld. We got DJ Short and Drew Silva. So, Drew, I'll start with you. How do you attack this baseball season from a fantasy baseball draft strategy in a different way than maybe we have in the past?
You know, I don't think my draft strategy changes all that much, and maybe that's a boring answer, but I think you still want to pick the best players available. You're still trying to fill out a well-rounded roster. You know, pitching will be weird for sure. It sounds like starters are going to be eased in with like 3 or 4 inning outings at first, but that's going to be a level playing field across your fantasy league. Everybody will have to deal with that issue, and you don't want to be left with pitchers who lack high-level fantasy upside because you push them too far down your draft board. Granted, over a much smaller sample size, which is what we're going to have in 2020, we'll probably see some crazy ERAs. Starters are only going to have 10 to 12 outings total. But the same could be said for hitters. I think there's plenty of evidence of non-elite players being able to produce elite stats over 1 month stretches, even 2 month stretches. I think closers is a different story, but I think we can handle that in its own segment. I will say that my in-season strategy might change a bit, getting a little more fast and loose with the waiver wire. If a player gets hot and quickly starts producing some big-time fantasy numbers, even without a track record of being able to sustain that, I might be more likely to buy in and grab him off the waiver wire because, again, we're dealing in small sample size theater. I think I'll be more aggressive streaming starting pitchers too. That goes for, I just, with the 3 batter minimum being instituted, even, I think there'll be a lot of pitching changes. I think ERAs are going to be weird because there's not enough time for that kind of rate stat to level out. So I want to dominate strikeouts, and those to get the high level strikeout guys who can flirt with an 11 to 13 strikeouts per 9. You're going to have to pay a high cost still.
What do you think, DJ?
Yeah, I think the first thing you need to do is just embrace the randomness, because that's just what's going to happen. There's so much that's going to be out of our control. Obviously, this is baseball in the middle of a pandemic, so we have to keep that in mind, and some crazy things are going to happen. And that's not even including, as Drew said, just the small sample size, 60 games. That's about 37% of a usual season. So, if a player starts cold, that could sink your whole season. Just think back to last year with Jose Ramirez. Through the first 2 months, he was hitting 204. So that could really sink your season if he's a first round pick. So, I think we do have to embrace that strangeness that's going to be happening here. And there are going to be so many outliers of players who might start out hot and can ride you to a championship. And that's kind of just the way it's going to be. I think that maybe I'd push starting pitchers down the board a little bit because, as Drew said, only 12 starts. I mean, if there's 2 bad starts mixed in there with 10 okay starts, you're still talking about a starter who might have like a 4 or 5 ERA, who might be an elite starting pitcher normally. So you have to keep that in mind too. So just some crazy things are going to happen. And, also just think these pitchers ramped themselves up in March, had to shut down for 3 months. And after ramp themselves up, they're only going to get 3 exhibition games. So it's going to be really hard to just go from, maybe it'll be a little different facing your teammates and then suddenly having to be in that different competitive environment with no fans in the stands. It's going to be really strange. I think we're going to see potentially a lot of pitcher injuries. So that's something to keep in mind too. So I think generally hitters are the safer investment. We say that in dynasty leagues, but I think that's the case this year with this strange season as well.
Do you think there's an opportunity here, Drew? And you mentioned being quick on the trigger finger, dropping a guy or picking a guy up if you see a guy going hot. Is there a chance in the draft to maybe pinpoint some players who are more high variance, some guys who do go through some hot stretches and cold stretches because you feel like, man, maybe they might be able to put it together for the full 60 games?
Yeah, well, that made me think of, there is like always this messy middle round for starting pitchers during a draft, guys who you hope can break out. And I'll be less inclined to like take chances on those types. I want established starters, even like veteran starters or guys who have already done it, rather than the guy that I'm dreaming could become something. And I'm going to prioritize strikeouts. I want high strikeout pitchers. Getting back to your question with batters who, I don't know, they're proven that they can have hot streaks. It could go either way, right? Like they could have a really good 2-week stretch and a really bad 2-week stretch. So I don't know. I haven't really thought that through enough, honestly.
I think someone that stuck out immediately to me when you said that was someone like Joey Gallo. And we saw some of that with him last year before he got hurt. It looked like he finally figured some things out. But, you know, he's a guy who generally you don't count on for batting average. But we're only talking about 2 months. Who knows? Maybe he can get hot. Maybe he hits. I don't know what we're setting as the benchmark for homers, but he's capable of leading the league in home runs. But I think if you want to look for things that might be a little bit stable that you can count on is hitters who don't strike out very much. You know, that's generally a skill you can count on. More likely to hit for a high batting average. I think that's something maybe you could look at. But again, in a high strikeout pitcher, you know, generally that's a good thing. You're keeping the ball out of play. That's something that the pitcher can control. So those are things you're going to have to look at.
Go ahead.
As we're talking, but I just thought stolen bases too, like the difference this year between like a guy who doesn't steal any bases and a guy who's going to steal a lot of bases is going to be like 5 to 7 steals.
Yeah, that's true.
So I'm more inclined to like get some all around. I mean, you want that in every draft, but you kind of want an all around player more than you want, you know, a big slugger who's going to strike out a lot, like DJ said.
I mean, they say speed doesn't slump. I mean, players might go into slumps this year, but you're going to accrue those steals, and it's going to be so valuable in a 60-game sample where a lot of fantasy teams are going to be bunched together anyway.
Well, here's one thing. If you've always wanted to try something in a fantasy baseball draft, maybe this is the year to do it. Go for broke in 2020. Drew Silva, DJ Short. Thanks for the insights, guys.